Judge Holden, the big old bald demon creature, abomination, beast, Moby Dick, and whatever else descriptor you want to use for one of the most vile, cruel, devilish, and just overall barbaric characters in all of literary fiction, no less than historical fiction in general, when it comes to the nature of such a vile and brutal character, filled with such utter destruction and mayhem in their only drive, and be so easy to get invested into. Quite often McCarthy had these type of characters who were more than human, more or less anomalies in a lot of regards, but they were quite more or less grounded in a sort of psychological element. With Holden, you have a very explicitly a supernatural character, an entity that has a lot of malleable sort of contusions and characterization and nuances and layers towards how you can symbolize him, and what of course he represents as a character not only for humanity but just in general for an overall spectrum of character and theme for, of course, McCarthy's magnum opus, Meridian. He's very intelligent, very musically gifted, very loquacious, and very charismatic and charming, and very joyful and boisterous, and overall just cheery individual who so happens to be a scalper, genocider, maniac, corrupt politician, and overall just absolute monster. Holden as a character is a very, very, very interesting paradox. It's an anomaly for not only just McCarthy's work, but just in general for the reality at hand there. He's one of the few times you have a character with more or less an objective stance that doesn't really get contradicted or, more or less proven wrong. And of course, you have characters that try to prove him wrong, that try to say Holden ultimately is incorrect about his point of view and perspective on an inherently misanthropic, nihilistic, and overall, depraved characterization for all of humanity within his own central, viewpoints. Of course, with Holden, he's kind of right. The whole issue with Holden, of course, is that he's ultimately speaking from a very supernatural, very, very clear, omniscient, and omnipresent entity who's just having fun becoming some of the worst aspects of humanity, manipulating people, controlling them, and showcasing the flaws in their logic and their philosophies and their theologies in the nature of reality, while also being a man of great virtue when it comes to the intellectual arts. In a lot of ways, you can even see how the direct quotations of Oswald Spengler and Nietzsche reflect a very keen view on the nature of not only civilization and the duration of which we have for our own cycles when it comes to our own predications for violence and history and overall, society as a whole. It's a very interesting analysis there, and what that comes from is the Übermenschen philosophy, the very same philosophy that the likes of Adolf Hitler himself viewed as a means of justifying a lot of the actions he committed during, of course, World War II. And it's very much a lambasting and a critique of a lot of the philosophical ideas, especially for the loquacious nature of Holden and how he manipulates the lesser and more barbaric and overall dullard populace in order to actually get what he wants and what he desires, as well as more intelligent people and just overall playing a game, because he doesn't really care. He won't ever die, he won't ever lose, he won't ever have anything to distill him. It's what makes him such an ultimately fascinating and beautifully evil and macabre character to analyze, because he's such a clear example of the unconscious and subconscious psychological elements we have. Our id, our ego, our superego, our various Jungian collective consciousness and our unconsciousness and our subconsciousness and our conscious decision-making being intertwined. Holden as a symbol is universal for every society, culture, and idea. Classical archetypes the likes of Jung could identify and point out. It's the nature of evil, of primal, distilled violence. Every single psychological and psyche analysis tends to center in and really focus on the nature of our primacy for violence and trying to answer that and try to find ways to control that in a lot of regards, or even find ways to sort of explain for that. With Holden, he's the most intelligent mind, someone that ultimately understands completely the nature of what intelligence can do, and he uses it as nothing more than a weapon, because quite often the book itself is a critique as well of intelligence. There is a common thing that the people who live the simple life, who have less so gratuitous need for power or glory or ambition or some sense of purpose or any sense of, well, selfish longing or otherwise personal longing tend to lead a path that is unbelievably unsatisfying. A path that is filled with horrific tragedy, brutality, and a lot of mistakes and errors and regrets. The Nietzschean elements themselves with Holden are very clear with not only just the Übermensch, but a lot of the nature of the games that Holden talks about, with Nietzsche using the very Greek philosophy and the nature of power and conquest as proof of the nature of the universality of games. Games of philosophy, games of politics, games of a lot of that were a common motif and a thematic element in a lot of Greek mythology and mythos. Ideas that were sparred in the nature of the boy within us all. You can say that Holden is ultimately some manifestation of manifest destiny, of civilization, of the nature of humanity itself within the colonialism and various other methods of the Western frontier and the conquest. But he's far from being just that. He's not just a devil, not just a Moby Dick parallel or allegory. He's something far, far more evil than that. Thank you, Cormac McCarthy. May you rest in peace.